Good afternoon. Thank you for everyone who is joining us, all of our attendees, those that are joining us here on Zoom. We appreciate you. We know that you could be anywhere else in the world, but you're here with us, so that means a lot. One of the reasons that we're holding this space for our comrades and for those that are activated, whether on active duty, reserve, guard, or otherwise, is to really just hold space to say that we understand what it's like to go through times like This time is unprecedented with COVID-19 and the national unrest and rebellion for the validation of Black lives. We felt that it was really important for us to come and hold space for those who are still wearing combat boots and who are still subjected to commander orders to mobilize. And really just, the tags around this conversation is around moral injury, objection to orders, peer support, courage, and above all, we have your back. And so really we have an hour to share different perspectives, to share our stories, and really, to just focus on GI rights. So not just this week, this session, also next week, we'll be razorly focused on GI rights because we know that that is such an important topic given where we are in the world. And so, for those of you who are joining us on Zoom, you'll see that there's a Q&A function where you can use that to post questions, and then there'll be a time in the agenda where we'll have time to answer that. And then in the other part of that is that you can use the chat, the panelists, give us some shouts out if you know and want to share some information, you'll be able to use the chat. And on Facebook Live, once we're live, it will allow you to communicate with us there. My glasses are foggy. But once we're on Facebook, you'll be able to interact there, and we'll have some folks that'll pop the questions over into Zoom. And we're having a little bit of tech connectivity on Facebook, so it may be a moment before we are live. But in the meantime, we can go ahead and just allow folks to go ahead and share their stories. So without further ado, Brittany, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And, I'm going to echo what Natasha said and just say thank you for joining us. My name is Brittany Chantel. I'm a hip hop artist, visual artist, activist, veteran. I served in the Army National Guard for 7 years, 2011 to 2018. Throughout my story, I feel like there were a lot of different levels of mindfulness that I had and that consciousness level. I feel like when I started out and I joined, I was very, very, very brainwashed. And mostly what brainwashed me, I believe, is a mixture of my family's history of military service, as well as being in the Marine Corps JRTC program in my high school. I wanted that connectivity. I wanted that brother and sisterhood. I wanted the camaraderie, really, and that's what I felt in JRTC in high school. As we know, JRTC is a lot different than real life, real military. But we all know why, or maybe we don't all know why, but JRTC exists for a reason. And that is to recruit kids. I joined the Army National Guard fresh out of high school. I left for basic training 10 days after graduating. And I was 100% in it. I loved it. I loved every second of it. I definitely had high functioning anxiety during the my entire training phase. I was consistently worried about my college money getting ripped away from me. And honestly, that is what drove a lot of my decisions in the military. Fast forward about a year and a half into me being in the National Guard, and I was sexually assaulted. And it was at that point where I kind of realized that everything that I thought about the military was essentially a lie. Um, and I feel like sometimes that can be taken as me being dramatic, but if you think about it, every single branch of the military has a set of Army values, or excuse me, a set of values, and they're all pretty similar. And I'll never forget the Army values. They were drilled into my head over and over again: loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, personal courage. And if people are being sexually assaulted, sexually harassed, raped, etc., then those values aren't being upheld by everybody in the Army. So I kind of realized that I was involved in an institution of hypocrisy, really. It wasn't just that, though. There was racism, there was homophobia. I witnessed people going through transphobia, xenophobia. I mean, keep spitting out the phobias and the isms, and it was pretty much apparent. Through that, I still didn't really feel like I had the power. I feel like I didn't have the empowerment to leave, and I wanted to for a really long time. Pretty much what only kept me in was things that I was told that I thought was true. So I very much so didn't know my rights. I very much so didn't know what the real consequences were going to be if I tried to get out. And I also had that looming kind of, that perk of being in the military over my head, which was the free school. So I had, just constant fear of, if I do this, will they take my money away? If I do X, will I have to pay back my college money? And debt was a very serious thing for me. I didn't want to be in debt. So long story short, and in a bittersweet way, I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And I say bittersweet because my fibromyalgia was definitely stemmed from my military sexual trauma. It's been proven by many doctors through research that fibromyalgia can be a trauma response. And, my body hurts all the time. It doesn't feel good, but it was essentially my ticket and my way out of the National Guard. So I was medically discharged officially in November of 2018. And ever since then, I've been more vocal than ever through social justice and through change, and just trying to get the word out about what the military is and isn't, and making sure that the youth don't get stirred up into the same lies that I was stirred up into. So, thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. I know that's a lot to share.
Yeah, it is. Thank you for sharing, Brittany. Without further ado, our next speaker, Myles, the floor is yours.
My name is Myles Mega Syph. I'm a hip hop artist, revolutionary rapper, artivist. I use my music to wake people up to the truths of the society that we live in. Very similar to Brittany, I went into the military completely disillusioned or illusioned. I went into the military with the wool pulled over my eyes. I was 13 years old when I went into a recruiting office in New York and told the recruiter, I'll be back. Arnold Schwarzenegger type voice, thinking it was the coolest thing ever. And I grew up in Brooklyn to a single mom who worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3 jobs to put food on the table. And we moved to Atlanta when I was 16, finished my junior and senior year of high school down there, and was woken up to racism in America. In Brooklyn, my school was 98% Black. So everybody in the school looked like me, talked like me. And in Atlanta, it was culture shock. I got called a nigger for the first time by a kid I'd been playing with all summer before school started. And then in the classrooms, the teachers didn't give me any credit for things that I knew were right. My grades dropped. I graduated high school. They pushed me out of school. I graduated with a 1.7, like a D average. Didn't get into any colleges, and the Marine Corps accepted me. My recruiter had been in my ear my entire senior year. He'd taken me out to dinner a few times. He bought me cleats for football. He'd put money in my pocket. So I believed everything that he said. And on the off to boot camp, my buddy and me got separated. They said my buddy was 1 pound overweight, and so he couldn't ship out with me. So they shipped me out on my own. To find out many years later that recruiters get bonuses when they split buddies up, because they really want to break us in boot camp. They don't really care if you make it. Boot camp was horrible. It was an absolute nightmare. And on people who haven't been in and are like, yeah, it's supposed to be because it makes you ready for war. But boot camp is dehumanizing. Boot camp turns you into an animal, because the only way you can kill a person is if you don't feel human yourself. And so our platoon started with about 75 Marines. We graduated like 35 of us. So half didn't make it. And I saw people cycle through that had been on that island for almost a year. They had been on Paris Island almost a year, cycling through different platoons. In boot camp, 2 Marines got raped. It was with broomsticks, like something you see in the movies. It was allowed by the drill instructors. My mate to my right got beaten so badly one night with the soap. They got racked so badly that he pissed his bed for the next month before they shipped him down to a lesser platoon. And my heavy was a dark-skinned Jamaican man, and me being light-skinned and well-spoken, I was called uppity nigga. I was called all sorts of racist, colorist terms by my drill instructor, who's supposed to build this pride and courage in me as a Marine. So I hated his guts. And the only reason I made it through boot camp, I believe, is because my mom was a fighter. My mom was a Panther. When I was young, she used to go to rallies, and she didn't raise me with a political education, but she raised me as a fighter. And so I made it through boot camp by turning off my soul. And when I left, I was already injured, morally injured. I went to Cuba as my first deployment. And in Cuba, my heart broke, because we have a 1 mile wide minefield around Guantanamo Bay before it was an internment camp. And Cubans would come into the base to work the base, and they would traverse through that minefield. And you can just imagine, a lot of times families didn't make it. They'd make it in pieces. There were times when babies would be trapped in barbed wire. So I didn't speak out politically in the Marine Corps because I was terrified of what would come down on me. And I just kept it all in. And bided my time quietly. And after 3.5 years of exemplary service, I popped on a piss test for smoking weed, and I got kicked out with an other than honorable. This is after seeing a whole bunch of horrible racism in the Corps, in the fleet, practiced on us and practiced on the civilian populations around us, both here and overseas, in Okinawa and in Cuba. And I came home to be quiet for the next 15, 16 years of my life. Suffering internally until I had a son, and my son brought out stories that my wife had never heard. And I wrote my first album and became involved with Veterans for Peace and started healing, the long process of healing myself, so I could share these stories with my kids and with other youth and keep people from joining the military-industrial complex at all costs. And so this is why I'm here, to share stories and to hear stories and to validate other people's experiences.
That was deep. Thank you, Myles. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being a co-conspirator in this work, because we feel you and we are with you. Next is Mike. Mike, the floor is yours.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike James. I'm going to start a timer here so I don't go on too long. My story is I joined the Navy when I was 26 years old. At that time, I had a degree in photography, and I'd been working as a commercial photographer for a few years. And I decided that I wanted to try something new. So I went to the recruiter and I said, if you'll make me a photographer, I'll join the Navy. And they said, okay. And they got me a contract and I signed it. I went to boot camp, and then I went on to a mass communications school where I studied mass communications, which essentially military propaganda, for 6 months. I went to aircrew combat school, and then on to my first unit, which was a squadron, a maritime reconnaissance squadron. Well, by that time, it was the beginning of the Obama presidency in 2008, and he wanted to do a surge in Iraq, in both Iraq and Afghanistan. So my Navy reconnaissance squadron was redirected from doing directly to Iraq. And we flew in tandem with Predator drones doing real-time reconnaissance on Army units on the ground and tracking the insurgency there. My experience in Iraq was we were stationed in the southern Iraq desert, where for a month in the summer it was nearly 130 degrees every single day for a month or a month and a half. Sandstorms. We were at the ancient city of where it is the understanding is that that's where Abraham was born and raised. So I saw the very beginnings of, civilization as we knew it, and I saw how it had been laid waste. That it was just a playground for war. Now we had these precious, sacred, ancient sites that were just totally laid to waste. There was depleted uranium. There was burn pits. There was 40 years of the detritus of war from the Iran-Iraq war. There were MiG fighters that had crashed. There was, spent munitions just everywhere. It was just an absolute wasteland. And, one of the things that really struck me is that, this should be an international site of pilgrimage. Every human being on the planet should be able to visit the sacred site and it be a totally peaceful and wonderful experience. But it was just an absolute, it was hell on earth. It was everything you would think of as hell. That really struck me, and it started to unwrap my mind. It started to make me think about what I was doing and why I was there and what we were accomplishing. And it turned out we weren't accomplishing anything. But at that time, I was still indoctrinated by military propaganda. We came home from Iraq, and 6 months later, I got bored. And I decided that I wanted to deploy again. So I volunteered to go individual augmentee and separate from the Navy and join an Army unit in Afghanistan. Oh, I should mention that throughout this time I was a photographer, so I was documenting everything. And I have a huge archive of all my work. Documenting it and having it now to look back on has served to fortify and given me a lot to think on. And I'm proud of that work, of my photography. But to get back to Afghanistan, I deployed as a public affairs person working for NATO, and we were the nation building branch of the military in Afghanistan. And I worked directly in the cadres of several generals over the year that I was there. And I saw firsthand the state of mind, the tactics, the strategy at the very highest levels for how to dominate and occupy foreign land. And I just saw, Kabul, Afghanistan. It's a mile-high city. It's an incredible, one-of-a-kind, beautiful, natural place high in the mountains that, again, it should be another tourist site. Everybody in the world should be able to travel to Kabul and take in the beauty of the culture and the natural landscape there. But instead, it was a playground for war. And you could see that the military wasn't helping anything. They were just making it worse. I saw that firsthand. And so eventually I got out of the Navy after working at the Pentagon and further seeing military propaganda and public affairs and how they did that. So I witnessed all these things at the highest levels, and now, several years later, 6 years later after getting out of the military, I'm now an anti-imperialist. I'm anti-war, and sharing my stories and sharing my photography are the most important work I can do with my life. It is my life's work. I'm really happy to be here. And I'm accessible as a resource if anybody out there has any questions. So I'm coming up on, that's my time limit, so I'm gonna pass the mic. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for sharing, for all of you, for being here, for your bravery, for your courage, just co-creating this space. We had a wild idea a little less than a week ago, and here we are with the mission of, like, you know, having our peers back, right? Whether they're active duty, Air Force, Army, Guard, Navy, Marine, you know, like, we understand what it's like to feel the pressures of being on active duty. And we felt like the best way to, like, open this conversation was to tell our personal stories, right? So just to share, like, a little bit about me, my name is Natasha. I'm originally from the South Side of Chicago. I was a part of the junior ROTC program in high school, and it was indoctrinated in me through that program that in order to, you know, leave the South Side and escape the violence here, that the opportunities for me to get school paid for, because I come from a working poor family, was to join the Air Force. And so I did that. And it wasn't long that I realized, you know, just going to Lackland Air Force Base and being just the shock of what basic training really was a completely different experience than what junior ROTC. So when Myles talked about they break you, that's right. If there's an experience that is as close to you see yourself leaving yourself, or you start to feel yourself leaving yourself, it was in basic training. And for some reason, my 4-year plan turned into 20. I have been stationed at about every command, just about every command in the Air Force. I've had special duty assignments where I've been in joint spaces with Marines, Navy, and I've reported directly to colonels and generals of all branches. And so it was really one of the assignments that was supposedly a feather in the cap, right? This is where I am talking about my military career, where I was drenched in patriotism, because in a unit, we yelled the Airman's Creed, and we brainwashed one another with why we were doing what we were doing, under the guise of protecting our families and keeping our people back home safe. And so it's really on, you know, protecting our families and keeping our, you know, fighting abroad to keep our families safe back home, that it was during this assignment that things started to change. And I'll just quickly explain the assignment. I was sent to Kuwait, Iraq, Kuwait, where our mission was to help with the drawdown from Iraq with the plus up or surge in Afghanistan. And one of our things that we did was the the mine resistant ambush protected vehicle, otherwise known as an MRAP, was to move them from the losing location to the gaining location. Well, without much consideration for the terrain, we ended up shipping a bunch of vehicles that were drivable in the desert to a mountainous terrain where they were not serviceable, right? And so at one point, the media found out or took a picture of what was deemed a parking lot of military equipment not being used. And so all of you know about the Defense Logistics Agency's 1033 program, where military equipment can be repurposed to city police departments and other governmental use, right? And so what ended up happening is we sent all of these vehicles there. They were not needed. Fast forward a year or a few years later, it sunk into me, like how the connection between the military and keeping my community safe. I saw that MRAP vehicle rolling down the streets of Ferguson in the just righteous uprising around the killing of Michael Brown. And it devastated me because it was the first time that I personally have a decoration that helped get me promoted, that I could connect to my people are not safe. Because it was a slippery slope in that every police officer that was out there was dressed similarly than the people in my active duty unit. So there was no light to me between what I was participating in and my people not being safe. And so my final assignment was in Florida, which should have been the peak of someone's career. I was sent to work at Headquarters Air Force Special Operations Command. No other Black woman had been in that position. And then Trayvon Martin is killed just a few hours away from me. And so I spent, my days from 7:30 to 4:30 on duty. And by 6 o'clock, I had my little 8-year-old in the truck and we were driving down to Tallahassee, 200 miles there and back, right? And so I'm saying that I also saw that presence, not just on base and training, but then in the civilian space against protests. So I understand why, the moral injury that I feel is that I didn't leave Chicago to make my people, my family, my community safe. In fact, I've been promoted on things that have devastated our people. I sit outside my daughter's school every day to wait on her to be released. And I see no knock warrants being, administrated on people that look like, these folks have the same exact uniform that we did when we went to training or to the field in those joint spaces, right? And so, when I see like there's this militarized presence in our communities and this containerism, and just to see and know what methods are being used on us, I felt like it was really important for us to hold space to tell folks like, I see you, I know your conflict, I know those that are starting to question things that don't make sense. And it's okay. That you are not alone, right? And so I really wanted to just share like my experience there. And then to really say, at a time where, if you all see, I'm wearing my Colin Kaepernick, I Know My Rights shirt. And I just want to quote him as I move to close my comments. And he said, I am not going to stand up and show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses Black people and people of color. To me, this is bigger than football, and it would be selfish on my part to look the other way. Colin Kaepernick. At the time that he said that, my unit was coming after me for any reason that I stepped off the line to promote me in the final year of my active duty career. So when Colin Kaepernick went on to say that I know that there are Black veterans that are mistreated in this country, that don't get a fair shake, that are not promoted when they should be, that there's a Black tax on active duty to even be promoted, right? You have to go through too much to even get to those points. There's an exceptionalism that's expected that we see in normal society. There's a military justice system that doesn't work for us. That is, there's a mass incarceration system in civilian sectors. There's also the same happening in the military prison sector. And so, when Colin took a knee, I was still on active duty thinking like, wait, he's taking a knee for me too. So we have to use these spaces. And I feel like I wanted to quote him because it was really a part of that movement that helped me start to unpack and say, I need to lay down this patriotism and start talking a real conversation about not just my experience, but giving space for those that share as well. Thank you for hearing me. It's not easy to speak, on things that bring you tension. So you heard my voice shake, but I think out of all of us, we're intentional that we're going to speak out anyway. And it's important for you to be here with us today again. So thank you. And so again, this webinar, we really wanted to focus on GI rights because we've heard that folks are calling the GI Rights Hotline and are talking about how, what they can do amidst COVID-19 and being activated. So we thought that it was really important. Veterans for Peace, our team was really gracious enough for us to extend the invite to Siri, who's here with us from GI Rights. And after Siri, we'll hear from Shauna from one of our other peer groups in the veteran space. So Siri, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Natasha. My name is Siri. I am a counselor on the GI Rights Hotline. I am here to, honestly, let's just roll it back. I'm here to support the courage of the people in the streets fighting for an end to white supremacy, and I'm here to support service members and veterans in this important, historic, and deeply legitimate uprising in defense of Black lives and, frankly, in the defense of humanity. It's about time. So that being said, I am, like I said, a counselor on the GI Rights Hotline. I'm also a longtime co-conspirator and ally to About Face, and have, this has been my political home for a long time. So the GI Rights Hotline was started by members of the historical Black churches, Quakers and Mennonites, et cetera, in support of conscientious objection. The first publication we had was called Getting Out. And so it was about helping people with issues of conscience regarding their military service. So that's where we came from, and we still do that work. Since the drawdown, it was pretty quiet at certain times. That started in the 90s, 1990s, 93, I think. There have been times when it was really quiet. After 9/11, it was anything but quiet. And at that point, we were throwing every person that we could find on the hotline to try to help people figure out what to do, because at that time, honestly, service members were mostly in shock that they were being sent to war, which was kind of, a lot of people took offense at that. But when you think about what recruiters say to you, it was completely normal, because how many recruiters had said, don't worry, you'll never go to war. You're going to get your college money, like Brittany was saying. So, and before I go one step further, I really want to say that what you have heard from the folks who have spoken before me, that is so important to hear that. And you are the people that the hotline strives to help. Even sometimes we do, but your stories are so true. They illustrate so many points of why the hotline exists and why it's important. And it is courageous to stand up, and it is also proof that moral injury is a real thing. It's not something like you might hear that moral injury or PTSD are a weakness, or because people are less than. It's not. That is totally real and totally legitimate, and something that we really have to think about is what, as human beings, can we tolerate? So that brings us to the purpose today, which is to talk a little bit about what that looks like in this moment for you service members who might be thinking, what am I doing here? What are my options? So conscientious objection is an option. That is something that it usually takes some time to get that together, but if you are being asked to, or you fear you're going to be asked to deploy to the streets, then it's time to start thinking about that. And I'm going to reiterate after every point, call the GI Rights Hotline, 877-447-4487. Call them, because there are counselors there who have been trained over these last 18 years in how to answer those questions and how to follow you through with support from beginning to end. So call the hotline, especially for CO, and you can also call Center on Conscience and War, which is pretty much dedicated to conscientious objection. But make those calls, get a counselor, get someone who's going to support you through that. You need to, and I'm not going to go into a big discussion about it, because you really need to either go to the hotline online and read about it and then call someone, or just go and call Center on Conscience and War and GI Rights Hotline. Number 2, missing movement. If you feel like you can't go, there are often good reasons why you can't go. So the first thing to do, again, is call the GI Rights Hotline and have a discussion about that. You may have physical or mental health reasons why you actually can't. It would be best not to deploy at this time. You may have a hardship discharge in, you know, your family might need you. You might be an essential worker. There might be a lot of reasons why, without calling a lot of attention to yourself, you can just decline to show up. And it has been the experience that sometimes, just because that while they say that your deployment in the National Guard is mandatory, you might actually, if you address your command and say, I just can't go, and you can explain the reasons. I mean, there have been cases in this period where people have been let off just like that. So that's the first thing. We don't jump to the most extreme thing first. I'm going to go back to the CO though and say that that is something to think about long term, because that may be something that people want to really have in their minds as something that they might want to do now or in the future, no matter what branch of service you are in. But if you are starting to have doubts about your service, the way these people have talked to you about how it happened to them today, call one of these places and get really introduced to what being a conscientious objector means. Okay, refusing orders. So Article 92 of the UCMJ defines the consequences of disobeying an order, but I think everyone who is in the service knows that disobeying an order is going to get you in trouble. And what exactly that trouble is going to be, it depends on so many factors. I can't give you an answer like this is exactly what's going to happen if you disobey an order, whether it be missing movement or refusing orders because you consider them to be unlawful or because you just can't bring yourself to do them. These kind of things. We're in a special time right now. We don't know exactly how things are going to come down. We don't have a lot of historical precedent for how people are going to be thinking about this in a few weeks. But you are not alone, as has been said by just about every speaker. You are not. There are people out here, whether they're people like the other panelists who are veterans like yourself, or whether they're people like me who've just been doing this for a lifetime because it's important work. So GI Rights Hotline, Center on Conscience and War, VFP, About Face, we are in this and we're committed to staying in it to make sure that people who are having a crisis of conscience or who just want to get out have help, okay? So historically, however, there have been ways that soldiers for centuries have dealt with these problems, like just fading into the background and, you know, not, you know, not shooting right on target. I mean, there are lots of ways that soldiers have had to make choices throughout history also, that they are not, you can still get in trouble. You can be charged with an Article 92 if people see you doing that. It's a, you know, but again, we have to, you know, people will do what they have to do. And that is historically a choice that some folks have made. In regards to the unlawful orders, it is very important, if you think that you are being asked to do something that is unlawful, that you document the situation. Ask your command if it is a direct order. Try to get them, you know, so that you can at least write that down. Best is if you can have the conversation recorded so you hear them telling you that it is a direct order, that they are ordering you to do it, and then ask under what authority that order is being given. So you have that for when you have to go, you know, to defend yourself. That is documentation. And, you know, you hear a lot of things, like somebody told me this morning that they heard it, that they heard that it's just easy. If you're in the National Guard and you're not on Title 10 orders, that you don't have to go and nothing's going to happen to you. And that is, we have to be very, very careful to only give really correct information. We do not want to have any instances where we are telling people it's going to be easier than it is and they can just get away, that there's some simple way, because there isn't. And this is a moment that requires people to think about what they're doing, and for us to be, and to know where to go to get help when you need it. So don't, that's why we want to have this kind of occasion where we talk to each other about what is possible and what isn't possible. And also about the fact that there's so much gray area, but none of this should prevent us from doing what we feel in our hearts has to be done, okay? I also want to mention the regulations about protesting. The First Amendment of the US Constitution protects and preserves Americans' right to exercise free speech and the freedom of assembly, and that's for everybody, whether you're in the military or not. However, there are rules. So you cannot be going to demonstrations if you're on duty, if you're in uniform, if your activities would constitute a breach of law and order, or if violence is likely to result. So that's a pretty tight little bag, especially right now. However, there's also the Fourth Amendment. So again, we have to make choices. You definitely should not be showing up and representing yourself as a member of the military and talking at these demonstrations, because that is clearly in all the branches against the rules. But you do have the right to show up out of uniform, and again, you use your best judgment, you do what feels right to you, and you have people who are here to support you and help you no matter what your choice is. And like I said, moral injury is really real. PTSD, as everybody knows, is real. Moral injury is deeper, and it can have an effect on the way the rest of your life goes. So even though you're in the military, you're still, underneath all of your training and all of the regulations, you are a human being and you have choices to make. And it is your moral right to make decisions that are in line with where your heart is. And so call the GI Rights Hotline and be strong, be courageous, and stand up for our fellow citizens who need us at this time. And I'm here to answer any questions. I don't want to talk too much. I want to answer questions that people have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Siri, for breaking that down. I feel like this is what we envisioned, y'all. So without further ado, Shauna Foster joins us from, and I'll just take a moment to just say that we co-created this space because we wanted to, like we said, have our peers back. So we've set up an email where Veterans for Peace will create sort of a peer support. So if you have questions that don't come up while we're here, you can email standdown@veteransforpeace.org. We will, our communications folks will, we will, answer those questions, connect with you in a way that you feel safe, and to always say that whatever you all communicate with us will be strictly confidential in any way possible, because again, I was that airman that was looking for someone to support me, and I had few. So that is our word is bond, is that we are here to support you all, because we understand what it is. And so we are excited to have one of our peer groups about face. Depending on where you are in the nation, you may be better connected to, different veteran organizations. So we are not all, separated in this work. So Shauna's going to share with us about FACE's peer support program as well. Shauna.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I am a member of About Face Veterans Against the War, and in response to the Black Lives uprisings to defend Black life, we have been in solidarity And so we put out an open letter that over 900 veterans have signed on to, asking for troops to stand down. So my main message to you all is that you're not alone, and people have done this before, and the military community really is resisting the idea to be deployed in this country. I mean, we share the idea that people shouldn't be deployed, anywhere against or occupying any community, but especially being the moral conflict is very clear when you're asked to deploy against your own neighbors. So we at About Face Veterans Against the War have a peer-to-peer support network where you can email us at support@aboutfaceveterans.org. And you'll be connected with veterans like myself. I was in the Nebraska Army National Guard as a nuclear biological chemical weapons specialist, but we never deployed because there weren't any weapons of mass destruction. And when I found that out, I actually called the GI Rights Hotline, because I called About Face Veterans Against the War and asked them what I needed to do. And I was able to leave the Guard with little consequence. Now, each situation is different. The orders and the conditions and your command are all different, but it can be done. And there's lots of different ways to resist. I wasn't a CO. I just didn't agree that we should be fighting a war for weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist, and the Bush administration knew it didn't exist. So if you want to follow your moral conscience, if you want to do the right thing and stand down for Black lives, be on the other side of the barrier, then I think you should call the GI Rights Hotline. You should reach out to Veterans for Peace. There's lots of veterans with lots of experiences similar to mine, and also to be contacting About Face Veterans Against the War. The main thing I want you to know is that you're not alone. There's a lot of us who believe in you, and there's a lot of your own peers that believe being asked to deploy against people defending Black lives is wrong and immoral. And you will be supported and you will be helped in the ways that you feel comfortable. The National Lawyers Guild Military Task Force also is on standby with lots of lawyers ready to help you. So explore your options. Call the GI Rights Hotline for an objective, confidential interview. But if you just want to talk to other veterans about, what is it that's going on? How do I do this? What are the ramifications? What will my peers think? What will my command think? We can definitely share those experiences with you and support you through this entire process. But the main thing I just want you all to know is that you're not alone.
Thank you so much, Shauna, for sharing, for all of you for sharing. We have a few questions that we'll take. And, before we close, we may go about 3 minutes over. We have a little bit of music that we'd like to share with you before we end. So to get through, I saw that some of the questions that are in here is basically saying, Mike, do you do any gallery showings for your photography?
Yes, I have had one gallery showing, which was very successful. I teamed with another artist who did some sculptural art, and that was in 2017, and we won Best Exhibit of the Year by the local city magazine. And so that was a big accomplishment for me. It was very emotional, and I really enjoyed doing it. But it was also kind of DIY, and I've always intended to do a more legitimate show, and it's something that I'm working on and struggling with and wrestling with for 6 years now. But I certainly intend on doing it, and I can use all the help I can get to make that happen.
Outstanding. Your work is on point. So please, if you share your website too later on through our page, that'd be great. The next question is there a correlation between moral injury and PTSD? Siri, would you like to put a button on that question and answer?
Absolutely, there is. I mean, I think that an interesting thing, PTSD is described as a syndrome. So it's like a recognized illness. And it sort of implies that the problem is that people got too close to traumatic events, and they were deeply traumatized because the event shocked them, frightened them, that, you know, this kind of thing. And moral injury is really when you do something that is against your deepest, most intimate, and most personal moral codes. And moral injury, and the one of the big differences between how accepted they are is that there are all these treatments now for PTSD that you know, with greater or lesser success. I mean, PTSD is, in my mind, it's, the two things are really deeply connected, really deeply. I don't even know if there's a difference, but what I do know is that there are medical approved treatments by the military for PTSD. There is not for moral injury. And the military, frankly, is looking for ways to solve moral injury in a way that it's sort of like we're going to create these new artificial limbs that you can just slap it on and you can go back to work in the military. And that seems like this great positive thing, but in fact, it's not. I mean, we do not want to be cured of our own morals. We do not want to be cured of what we have in our hearts that tell us that you know, we don't want to hate each other, that we want to see each other as humans. And you can just look at the examples of how this has worked out in our society. Why are we in 2020 having an uprising that is to recognize the value of Black lives in 2020? Because of things like denying us really that look into our own moral codes and thinking, I mean, honestly, do we have any excuse for this? You know, so I would say that the difference is one has a supposed means to be addressed as far as being cured, and the other one is still, there isn't any way you can address it by talking about it. You can address it by having your psychiatrist say, but it's not your fault. You were following orders, et cetera, et cetera. But is that what, you know, or are we going to protect ourselves and protect our own integrity as human beings? Sorry, that was a little evangelizing. Anybody else want to talk about it?
Okay. No, you're right. I definitely suffered moral injury and post-traumatic stress because of it. And when I went to go see the therapist, they were ready to write prescriptions for drugs in about the first 5 minutes of me going to see them. And I had seen other soldiers and troops and sailors and Marines and airmen all struggle with the same thing. And I'd seen them do all kinds of strange behavior with their families, abuse their wives, abuse their children. And I saw right away, I was like, I don't want these drugs that they're going to give me. Now, I'm not a psychiatrist and everybody has to make their own choices. But I mean, beware, look out, red flag. If you walk in 5 minutes, they're ready to write a script and get you out of there. Good heavens, beware. Yeah. So we're at 4:53. We've been on for 53 minutes now. Where do you think we should go from here, team? Anyone? Myles? Natasha?
Natasha, do we have another pressing question that we should answer?
Yeah, one, Myles will share his website both in the chat and I don't know if we can plug. We didn't even get permission for that, but hey, we'll do it. We'll ask for permission. That's what we learned in the military, right? The final question that I think is really pressing, and those, we have two others that we will answer. We'll post it on our Facebook. So if you're not already connected, it's at Veterans for Peace on Facebook, and we'll also upload it on Twitter. So follow us here and we'll post that in the next hour. This last question, it says, is there precedence in the U.S. for service members to seek CO status or any other form of resistance to being deployed in the U.S. against U.S. citizens? For example, was there such resistance in the National Guard during Vietnam War when used against protesters, i.e. at Kent and Jackson State?
Yeah, if I can just jump in on that really quickly. It was the CO status was harder to get back in those days because first of all, it was supposed to always be religiously based, and we had, I don't remember what year it was, but it was finally made a question of your conscience, and you didn't have to prove that you were a Quaker or a Mennonite or whatever. So that was a big victory that came out of the Vietnam War era. And I think, and there wasn't a GI Rights Hotline there. There were draft counselors, and the pressures that were on those National Guard folks. So no, the answer actually is no. It was a lot harder. Fewer people knew about it. People were using it. And in those days, people went to jail, even as conscientious objectors. They often would be in jail for up to 3 years. So it's a different time. Now it is considerably easier to get it, and it is, but other than that, it has not changed a bit. Being a conscientious objector is when your conscience says that you cannot participate in war. And I think that the question about using it domestically, we're working on that. You know, I mean, you're supposed to be against all wars, but I think like everything else, we have to put our heads together and figure out how to move forward with this.
I would just say, as an example of resistance, I want to talk about the Fort Hood 43. So these were Black GIs that were active duty at Fort Hood who were called to put down the riots after King's death, and they refused to do so. And I linked an article in the chat for people to do that. But that's a clear example of people in the United States. And it seems the same sort of dynamic again, where it's people in the streets trying to fight for Black life, and the military being called on that's seen as such a threat compared to other protest movements that the military has to be called in. So there is that was 52 years ago that GIs did that. And so I want to say, you know, Black resistance is really important and powerful and groundbreaking, and we all need to follow that lead and stand down for Black lives now as they did then.
Brittany, I know you had some words you wanted to wrap us up with.
Yeah, sure. Just two things, you know, being that I myself was in the National Guard. If anybody would like to reach out, anybody who's in the National Guard who would like to reach out, please know that I am a resource for you. I do know what it's like to be scared, not necessarily for these specific reasons. I've never been faced with activating for protests, but I do know that many National Guardsmen have come forward saying that they are scared and that they feel that they are not trained to properly activate in their own streets for something like this. We all know what it's like, I think, to enter a situation that we are not prepared for. It doesn't feel good. I know I myself, even just thinking about it, gives me anxiety. So I just want to let you know that you're not alone, and I am always a resource. I put my my website link in the chat. My email is on my website. Feel free to email me if you need a resource. And I also would like to say that I do speak at high schools and colleges to students who are thinking of joining the military. I provide them with my factual experiences. I'll never tell someone to not join the military, because I'm not going to tell you what to do with your life, just as I don't want you to tell me what to do with mine. But I will give you the information that I think is needed, at least to make a more informed decision before joining, which I think is super important, especially right now at these times, because we are going to see a lot of people leave the military, and we're also going to see a lot of people join. So I just wanted to say that, and thank you again for joining.
Thank you, Brittany, for sharing. Myles, I, wanted to know, do you have any final comments? And then I know you will take us to our close if you want to do the introduction, and then take us out to our close of this webinar.
Yeah, I have Similar to Brittany, I do some counter recruitment work, some recruitment awareness workshops with We Are Not Your Soldiers project. That's a part of World Can't Wait. You should please check out worldcan'twait.org. The We Are Not Your Soldiers project is a national project. We're always looking for veterans around the country to go into schools, high schools, and universities and share their stories with students who are thinking about, like we've been saying, get the whole truth from the recruiters. And also I put my website in the link and my emails on that website, and you can reach out to me. I will chat with anybody who's interested. This is a very national and prescient conversation. Politico wrote an article about it yesterday called "What I Saw Was Just Absolutely Wrong. National Guardsmen Struggle with Their Role in Controlling Protests." And the author of the article goes on to talk about how they've been interviewing National Guards.
Did we totally lose Myles?
Okay, so I was like, is it me? We have a storm going through. Myles, can you hear us?
Oh no.
No. Until we get Myles back, yes, here in the Chicagoland area, Veterans for Peace, our Chicago chapter, our banner, you know.
Are we there? Are we here?
Yes, we are. I was just quickly sharing until we got you back that Veterans for Peace Chicago, that's what we really impress on. Chicago Public Schools is the largest militarized school district in the nation, and they spend millions of dollars on junior ROTC, indoctrinating nationalism into as young as middle school. So we spend time by going to the board meeting and going into schools where they will allow us to be able to, and we speak with poets. Young poets who write about militarism get a lot of that free game because we spend time in their classrooms. So we're proud to be partners in the anti-recruitment and demilitarization space in solidarity with coalitions here in Chicago. Myles, the floor is on you.
I think y'all lost me earlier when I said this, but can y'all hear me? I would like Brittany to introduce her own song. I'm gonna play it from here, but I want Brittany to introduce it because she'll do it better justice.
Thank you. Like I said, I'm a hip hop artist. I just put out an album in February of 2020 called The Golden Opportunity, which is pretty much an overview of my military experience. I talk about my sexual assault experience on there. I talk about military suicide and xenophobia, homophobia on there. So it's available on all platforms. Again, I'll link it in the chat. And the song you're about to hear is called Different. And it's basically, it's very relevant to the times that we're facing right now. It's my story about how I dodged a deployment and how I'm really proud of it. Thank you.
Yeah, this shit ain't about rewards and this shit ain't about rewarding this shit ain't about reward. This is just two different people, yeah. Different colors, different ways, yeah. Yeah, this shit ain't about rewards and this shit ain't about rewarding this shit ain't about reward. This is just two different people, yeah. Different colors, different ways, yeah. Yeah, I ain't going to war, I ain't deploying, you kidding? I just evaded that shit, cause fighting for life is like prison. Yeah, I ain't kidding, no going back when I made my decision. I feel like happiness isn't gonna result from my killing. Yeah, I ain't popping it up, that don't sound poppin'. I'm moving my paperwork to the States to stay for the record. I'm choosing to be an officer over taking a life overseas. I'll take a contract extended over corrupting the peace. Yeah, this shit ain't about rewards and this shit ain't about rewarding this this shit ain't about a war. This is just two different people. Yeah. Different colors, different ways, yeah. Yeah, this shit ain't about rewards, and this shit ain't about rewarding. This shit ain't about a war. This is just two different people, yeah. Different colors, different ways, yeah. And now they talking they shit. They say that Brittany ain't it. They say I'm lazy as fuck. They even said I should quit. They gave me 4 years of school. I think that's cool, but get this. Why would I ditch a degree to die with my hands on a cliff? And now I'm talking my shit. I thought it's smart how I did. It's either death of the ranch. I said, of course I'm a dip. I didn't break any laws. I beat them catching offense. I tell them therapy works. They actually care when you vent. Yeah, this shit ain't about rewards, and this shit ain't about rewarding. This shit ain't about a war. This is just two different people, yeah. Different colors, different ways, yeah. Yeah, this shit ain't about rewards, and this shit ain't about rewarding. This shit ain't about a war. This is just two different people, yeah. Different colors, different ways, yeah.
What a way to end. Thank you everyone for joining us. We'll be back live here next Wednesday. That is June 17th at 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 Central, 1 p.m. Pacific. We're going to be joined by others who are righteous and in this righteous rebellion for Black lives and resistance. So please join us. Look out for our flyer, register. We'll see you back next week. Hey, y'all want to go off mute and say bye to the people? We got
Bye, people.
Bye,
For being here.
everyone. We'll be back next week.
Hey people, we want new music every week. We want music every week, so we put a call out. Artists, send us your revolutionary songs, all right? We love you.
Thank you, everyone. Beautiful.
Thank you, Siri. You were awesome. Dope.
All right. Bye. Resist.
Resist. Hey family, are we gonna stay on?
No, we're gonna go on that other link on our document, and we'll do our
Myles, we're still live though. You gotta
yeah. Hit
I
in.
gotta end it. Okay. I love y'all.
Bye,
Peace.
everybody.
Peace.